A lot of you watched the last video, the one about the financial trap every generation falls into, and you left the same comment over and over. Okay, but what do the actual numbers look like? So I pulled the data, and honestly, I wish I hadn't. Because here's what I found. The average baby boomer has a net worth of over $1.6 million. That sounds like a generation that figured it out. So why are so many of them terrified of retirement? Here's the thing about that number. It's an average. And averages lie, because a small number of very wealthy boomers drag that number up for everyone. The median, the number that actually represents a typical boomer, is $432,000. And for a huge number of boomers, most of that is sitting inside a house they still live in. Gen X, the ones who watched boomers build wealth and thought they were on the same track. Their average net worth is over $1.1 million. Median, somewhere in the $250,000, and they have the highest average debt of any generation. Millennials, finally starting to catch up. Average net worth just crossed $333,000, up 13% in 1 year. But here's the gut punch. Nearly all of that is locked in home equity and retirement accounts they can't touch. Researchers actually have a name for this: phantom wealth. And Gen Z, the most financially literate generation in history, average net worth around $87,000, growing faster than any other generation right now, and still carrying the same blind spot as every generation before them. Every single number sounds almost okay. That's exactly the problem. Let's get into it. Here's the thing nobody tells you about wealth statistics. The number that gets reported is almost never the number that represents you. When a small group of people have an extraordinary amount, and in every generation they do, they pull the average up for everyone. The headline looks healthy. The typical person underneath it does not. So for every generation, I'm giving you two numbers: the average and the median. The one that sits right in the middle, the one that actually represents a normal person in that group. And then I'm going to show you what's hiding underneath even that. Because there's a version of wealth you can spend, and there's a version that looks great on paper but can't pay a single bill. Let's start with the boomers. Remember Robert? 68 years old. Beautiful home in the suburbs, raised a family. By every outward measure, he had it figured out. Well, here are Robert's actual numbers. As a generation, baby boomers have amassed $80 trillion in wealth, primarily in the form of stocks and real estate. That's more than half of all household wealth in the nation, despite boomers making up only about 20% of the U.S. population. Average net worth, $1.6 million. The median, the more meaningful midpoint figure for 65 to 74-year-olds, is a much lower $410,000. Now, $410,000 might still sound okay, until you run the retirement maths. Fidelity suggests retirees should aim for savings equal to 10 times their annual salary by age 67. With the median salary for Americans aged 55 to 64 at around $66,000, that implies a retirement target of about $660,000. And that's just Fidelity's conservative benchmark. A Northwestern Mutual survey found that the average magic number Americans say they need for retirement is $1.26 million. So Robert, sitting at $410,000 in median net worth, is roughly $250,000 short of the conservative benchmark, and more than $800,000 short of what most people say they actually need. But here's where it gets worse. A huge chunk of that $410,000 isn't liquid. A typical individual aged 65 to 74 owns a home valued around $320,000 and has retirement savings near $200,000. Think about what that means. If most of your net worth is the house you live in, you can't spend it without selling it. And the average 401k balance among baby boomers at the end of 2024 was just $249,300. That is the liquid pot. That's what actually has to fund decades of retirement. According to a 2025 Vanguard report, only the top 30% of income-earning baby boomers are truly ready for retirement. Vanguard also found that median income individuals are expected to experience an annual spending shortfall of $5,000, 13% of their overall spending needs, in retirement. And then there's Social Security. the backstop that the whole system is leaning on. On average, Social Security is designed to replace about 40% of a person's annual pre-retirement income. But as of January 2025, the estimated average monthly Social Security benefit was just $1,976, less than $24,000 a year. And approximately 9 out of 10 baby boomers are counting on it to help fund their retirement. More than half, 52.5%, of the boomers turning 65 by 2030 have less than $250,000 in total assets, including savings and real estate. And researchers project that 2/3 of this group will be challenged to maintain their lifestyles in retirement. 2/3. Robert didn't get it wrong. He played the rules of his era almost perfectly. He bought a home when homes were affordable, he built equity, he accumulated more than any generation in history. The problem isn't what he did, it's what was missing from the plan. The house became the whole plan. And now the house can't pay the grocery bill. Then there's Ken. 52 years old, solid career, nice car, holiday every year. If you looked at his life from the outside, you'd think he was doing great. And the numbers seem to back that up until you actually look at them. If baby boomers are the generation everyone talks about, Gen X is the generation nobody does. And that invisibility might be the most dangerous thing about their financial situation right now. Gen X sits between roughly 45 and 60 years old today. They watched boomers build wealth. They followed the same playbook: careers, mortgages, lifestyle upgrades, and on paper, they look fine. Average net worth, $1.13 million. Median net worth, $247,000 for those aged 45 to 54, rising to $364,000 for those 55 to 64. Now compare that to what retirement actually requires. Most experts agree Gen X needs between $1 million and $1.5 million saved for a comfortable retirement. According to Fidelity, Gen X workers in 2025 have an average 401k balance of about $192,300. But the median retirement savings is closer to $115,000. Let that gap land. A median retirement savings of $115,000 against a need of $1 to $1.5 million, with retirement, for most of them, less than 15 years away. And here's the debt picture. Gen X has the most debt of any generation, over $6.69 trillion in total as of 2024. Gen Xers have the most credit card debt per person at $9,600, and the highest average student loan balance of any generation at $44,240. So Ken, and millions like him, is high in debt, low in liquid savings, and running out of time. And almost nobody is talking about it. Part of why is the sandwich generation problem. Many Gen Xers are simultaneously supporting both aging parents and their own children. This dual financial pressure forces many to reduce or pause retirement contributions, and in some cases to take on new debt or withdraw from savings early. Only 19% of Gen X workers feel very confident about their ability to retire comfortably. 19%. That means 8 in 10 Gen Xers, a generation in their prime earning years, are heading into the back half of their working lives feeling financially uncertain. Gen X holds $42.6 trillion in total wealth, roughly half the wealth of boomers. That gap reflects slower income growth compounded by weaker stock market performance in the years following the dot-com bust, years that overlapped with Gen X's prime earning period. Boomers, by contrast, benefited from a fourfold surge in financial markets during their 30s. Ken didn't get the tailwind, he got the aftermath. And now he's almost out of runway. Marcus is 38. He paid off his student loans slowly, watched his friends buy houses he couldn't touch, and spent his weekends at brunch and weekend trips. And for a long time, the cultural narrative around him said that was fine. That experiences were the real wealth. So what do Marcus's numbers actually look like? Millennials are having a strange financial moment, and the data reflects it. The average net worth for millennials hit $333,096 in 2024, a 12.74% increase in a single year. All told, millennials have accumulated $15.25 trillion as of mid-2024, up significantly from $3.93 trillion just 5 years earlier. Those are genuinely impressive numbers, and they tell a story of a generation that was written off as financially hopeless and proved the critics wrong. But here's what the headline hides. In early 2024, millennials and older Gen Zers had, on average and adjusting for inflation, about 25% more wealth than Gen Xers and baby boomers did at a similar age. That sounds like victory, until you look at what that wealth is made of. The biggest driver of that increase was real estate. Millennials' housing wealth grew $2.5 trillion after accounting for the additional mortgage debt they took on. And between January 2020 and December 2023, U.S. home values rose over 40%, according to Zillow. So much of the millennial wealth surge isn't income, isn't savings, isn't disciplined investing. It's the value of a house going up in a market they didn't control. Gains in the value of a home or a 401k can feel like phantom wealth because they are illiquid and have no bearing on day-to-day cash flow. Marcus can't sell a room of his house to pay for childcare. He can't tap his 401k without penalties until he's nearly 60. The wealth is real, technically, but it's locked behind walls, literally and figuratively. And the debt picture makes it even more complicated. Millennials carry average total debt of $132,280 and climbing, with the highest average mortgage balance of any generation at $320,000. The wealth gap within the millennial generation is also the largest of any generation. According to a study published by the University of Chicago, millennials are so different from one another that it is not particularly meaningful to talk about the average millennial experience. Which means this: the millennial averages are being pulled up by a relatively small group who bought homes before 2020 or got into the market at exactly the right moment. For everyone else, the renters, the late buyers, the ones who graduated into the 2008 financial crisis, the picture is much harder. More than any other generation, millennials say financial success is much harder for them to achieve compared with previous generations. And they're not wrong to feel that way. They're wealthier on paper than any millennial generation in history. And still, for millions of them, it doesn't feel like it. That gap between what the numbers say and what the lived experience is, that's Marcus's world. That's phantom wealth in action. And then there's Zoe, 24 years old. A TikTok, a side hustle, already 3 months into her investment journey. The most financially aware 24-year-old in her family's history. She knows what an index fund is. She talks about compound interest. She posts about her portfolio. So surely she's the one who escapes the trap, right? Not quite. Gen Z's average net worth hit $86,945 in 2024, up nearly 22% in a single year. That's the fastest rate of growth of any generation, and this is a generation that genuinely knows things. In 2025, 21% of Gen Z invested in the stock market, up from 15% the year before. So it seems like they've figured it out, except here's the stat that stops me every time I look at it. According to an Empower survey, Gen Zers on average believe an annual salary of $587,797 and a net worth of $9.47 million are needed to achieve financial success. For context, for baby boomers, equivalent figures were just under $100,000 a year and $1.05 million in net worth. So Zoe, with an average net worth of $87,000, has defined financial success as needing $9.5 million. That is a gap so large that for many of her generation, the goal doesn't feel achievable. And when the goal doesn't feel achievable, the psychological tendency is to stop trying to optimize and start trying to feel okay right now. Bank of America data shows that Gen Z's spending was nearly twice as much as what they had in savings. And over 55% of Gen Z do not have enough emergency savings to cover even 3 months of expenses. Meanwhile, the TIAA Institute reports that Gen Z actually has the lowest financial literacy rate of any generation at 38%, despite being the generation most likely to consume financial content online. That's the twist. Zoe knows the language, she follows the accounts, she posts about her portfolio, But financial fluency and financial literacy are not the same thing. Knowing the words doesn't automatically mean understanding the maths. And there's a pattern that shows up in the data. Gen Z is performing financial awareness in public, while the actual numbers, savings rates, emergency funds, debt loads, tell a more complicated story in private. Zoe isn't doomed, not even close. She's 24 and she's already ahead of where Marcus was at 24. And 71% of Gen Zers say they are optimistic they will achieve financial success in their lifetimes. That optimism isn't delusional. It's mathematically justified. Compounding is brutally powerful when you start early. The question is whether the action matches the optimism. So, let's pull the thread. Robert, Ken, Marcus, Zoe. 4 people, 4 generations, 4 completely different sets of numbers, and underneath every single one of them, the same pattern. A headline net worth that sounds almost okay, and a real, usable, accessible net worth that is significantly smaller, locked behind home equity, retirement account penalties, debt obligations, and the uncomfortable gap between what you own and what you can actually spend. Robert with $410,000 in median net worth. Most of it a house he still lives in. Ken with $115,000 in median retirement savings and less than 15 years left. Marcus, whose wealth surge happened mostly because his house went up in value. Zoe spending nearly twice what she's saving while posting about financial freedom. Different numbers, same blind spot. So before I wrap up, here are 3 questions I want you to honestly apply to your own situation. Not for me, for you. 1. How much of your net worth is actually liquid? Not your home, not your 401k. Money you could access in the next 30 days without penalties or selling your house. 2. If you lost your income tomorrow, how long could you actually last? Not what you think the answer is. The real number. 3. Is your wealth growing, or is it just inflating? There's a difference between building real assets and having your house go up in a market you don't control. These are uncomfortable questions, but they're the ones that separate the people who looked fine on paper from the people who actually were fine when it mattered. You've seen the numbers now. You can't unsee them. The question is what you do next. Tell me in the comments, which generation's numbers surprised you the most? Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because chances are they already know something's off. They just haven't seen the data yet.